How about we go into what are mayfly patterns and why are they unique?
3,000 species in North America. And now we consider this the most famous fly pattern or fly design that most people are going to think about when they think about fly fishing. They think about the mayfly. It's a very elegant bug. The cool thing about a mayfly is that there's close to like 63 different species of mayflies that fly patterns have tried to mimic throughout the, since the beginning of fly time.
So why don't we get started with diving deep into like what exactly are midges then, Matt? What are midges?
Yeah, so midges are non-biting flies, so it's not a mosquito. They pretty much are those tiny little bugs that you see everywhere. I mean, you find them in puddles, you find them at the airport, you find them in your kitchen. There's over 17,000 different species of what we consider midges, but really it's one of the smallest food sources, but the most important food source for trout. You have 4 stages of fly. You have the nymph, you have the emerger, and that's when it's coming to the surface. And then you have the adult, which is when it's flying around. And then you have what they call the spinner. That's after it's mated and it's died and it's on the water.
Hey guys, it's Dennis Ventura here, and today we're back with another episode with Matt from Drifthook. How's it going, Matt?
Good, Dennis. How about yourself, man?
Doing well. Last time we left off, we were going into some of your best sellers or one of your best selling products. And what I want to do today is kind of drill down into the product and everything that's included in there.
Yeah.
And we found some questions also from customers, and we're going to be answering them. So if anybody's watching this, stick around. We're going to be diving deep into, the products and all the uses of it. So
yeah, well, great. Well, thanks, Dennis. I appreciate the time again today. And I'm excited to showcase our number one selling fly fishing kit. It is our Guide Nymphs Fly Fishing Kit, double-sided, packed with 120 flies. Now, these are all in the nymphal stage. These are for nymphing. And we'll kind of go into detail about that as we kind of continue this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we get started with, the first question that we notice customers asking: what is the Guide Nymphs Fly Fishing Kit, and why is it the best seller?
So initially what we did when we started this program, we tried to make it a kind of more of a holistic approach to fly fishing. So if you've never fly fished before, we have videos that go into how to cast, how to tie knots, things like that. But one of the biggest things that I had struggling with when I was learning to fly fish was what fly are you going to use? Which one are you going to pick? What time of the year are you supposed to use it? So that's why we came up with the idea of the Drifthook Fly Fishing System. Initially what it is combining seasonal hatch charts with a pre-packed fly box. So you can easily look at those 2 items together and know, hey, when I get to the water, I got to use this fly this time of year. I know that this action's happening on the water, so I should probably use this fly. And we dive into detail of that with tons of videos on our site. But we can go into more detail about, why we picked these specific flies here in this video today.
Let's go to the next question, Matt. What is the Drifthook Fly Fishing System? What did you put together as a system?
Yeah, so our system combines seasonal hatch charts with the foundations of fly fishing. So you know what you're going to be using the minute you get to the water. How we did that is we've broken out each month into categories, into orders, and you're able to take those orders and the seasonal hatch chart and know exactly what fly you're going to need at any given time of the year. To make that easier on everybody, we've also labeled our boxes the same way with the hatch chart, so you know what you should be using. You can get there, you can look, you can open up your box and say, yep, today I should probably be starting with some caddis and maybe a midge. You can open it up, pick your colors, and go from there.
Awesome.
This is an easy way to help you match the hatch.
Yeah, that's actually, it's funny because that was the next question that I was going to ask. What is match the hatch? I've heard this over and over again from a lot of customers. What is match the hatch?
Yeah, so matching the hatch is really just trying to find which aquatic life is the trout going to be eating on that given day. And really all the fly patterns that are designed, are tied, are really based on 5 different orders.
Okay. And then why is that important?
Well, if you know what the trout are feeding on at any given time of the year, you're going to have a greater success rate the minute you hit the water. The hardest thing is knowing, okay, what should I be using? And if you're using the wrong thing, you're not going to be catching anything. And it's never fun to go out fly fishing and, you've been out on the water for 3 days and you might have 1 or 2 bites. And it could have been as easy as just you're using the wrong fly pattern that they're not into at that moment. And we try to help with that.
Okay. All right. Awesome, man. And then we've covered the system, right? What is the Drifthook Guide Nymph Kit itself?
Yeah. So the Nymph Kit itself is this box right here. It's the double-sided. It's all labeled. We have midges. We have mayflies. We have caddis, stoneflies, eggs, and annelids, or worms. And those are really your major food sources that trout are going to be eating throughout the entire world. Let's dive into each one of those. I can kind of explain what a midge is.
Okay. So, like, for example, I know, like, a lot of customers, they want to know, like, what's a caddis, what's the mayfly, or mayfly stonefly, right?
Yeah. So there are patterns, and we have that in our kit as well. Fly tires, sometimes they'll try to mimic multiple orders or multiple species. So specific patterns, like they mimic both a caddis and a mayfly. So we have a section just for those. These patterns are fantastic because you might not be sure, hey, are they hitting the caddis today? Are they hitting the mayfly today? Are they hitting a stonefly today? But these patterns right here, they kind of mimic both. So the trout's not going to be too picky. If they see something similar, they're going to go for it. And that's where, hook on, here we go, having fun. And that's what, fly fishing is all about.
Okay, awesome, man. So what if we go into each section of those regarding,
of
what
course,
exactly they are?
And I'll put on a little bit of kind of some tighter shots of this for everybody here at the end, and maybe we'll add some infographics as well, just to kind of get a little more detailed on what is a midge and how to look for a midge and things like that. So, and speaking of that, you want to just dive into what a midge is?
All right, so why don't we get started with diving deep into, like, what exactly are midges then, Matt? What are midges?
Yeah, so midges are non-biting flies, so it's not a mosquito. They pretty much are those tiny little bugs that you see everywhere. I mean, you find them in puddles, you find them at the airport, you find them in your kitchen. But these right here are a staple food for trout. I mean, that's the one thing that hatches year round. It could be December, it could be the middle of the summer. These things are hatching. So trout are constantly feeding on these. Think of them as like as popcorn, right? They're just constantly feeding on these type of food, right? There's over 17,000 different species of what we consider midges. But really it's one of the smallest food sources, but the most important food source for trout. In the UK, they call them chironomids or buzzers. And these can get actually kind of bigger to size 10 or 12 hook, which is about that big. But it's also very important over there. It's important for rivers. It's important for lakes. It's one of the staples of trout fly fishing.
Awesome.
There's a handful of patterns in our box that we provide to everybody, and they're kind of my favorites. My number one favorite midge pattern is the zebra midge. That's a super simple, easy pattern to tie if you ever want to get into fly tying yourself. But it's very successful. I have a lot of success on a red zebra midge. And the reason for that is when a midge is making its way through the water column, it's going to be pulling in a little bit more oxygen. The reason it turns red is because there's that more oxygen in the hemoglobin in that particular midge at that time. And it really, really makes those trout just kind of strike and hit that bug. It's pretty neat to see.
Wow. That's like a super technical and like kind of almost like the scientific way of approaching it. So, how about we go into what are mayfly patterns and why are they unique? I think you told me one time there's about 3,000 mayfly patterns.
Yeah,
is
there's
that
about
correct?
3,000 species in North America. And now we consider this the most famous fly pattern or fly design that most people are going to think about when they think about fly fishing. They think about the mayfly. And it's a very elegant bug. The cool thing about a mayfly is that there's close to like 63 different species of mayflies that fly patterns have tried to mimic throughout since the beginning of fly time. But really, the shape and the color and the way that these flies are tied is super cool because they're all kind of the same, but all different at the same time.
Wow.
The one thing that's neat about a mayfly is, and how you can tell when they're on the water, is that their wings are like sailboats when they're up on the water. There's two sailboats. So it's very elegant. Another thing that I like to look for if you're trying to say, hey, is this a mayfly? Is this a caddisfly? A mayfly typically has just 3 tails versus 2. Other bugs, such as your stoneflies, they have 2. But if you ever want to know, like, hey, is this a mayfly? Look for those sailboat wings and then look for those 3 tails.
Wow. Okay. And then obviously then after that, we could go into what are caddisflies. So how are caddisflies different from mayflies?
Yeah. So the caddisfly I would consider is the third most important food source for trout. And the difference between a caddisfly and the mayfly is caddisfly's wings kind of sit back on them when they're adults. Now, a lot of fly tires, they'll add an additional tail to it, but the real adult caddisfly doesn't have a tail. It's just kind of something that they like to add on a little extra to get a little more depth on that fly. But it's a very, very staple food source for trout as well. Another thing to kind of look into when you're looking for caddis or looking for caddis hatches is they're typically in the evening. Sun's going down, and that's when you're going to see those big, huge caddis hatches. There's a lot of famous ones, the Mother's Day caddis hatch up here in Colorado. A lot of people like travel around the world to fish these hatches. So it's pretty neat, pretty cool.
Wow, awesome. And then you've put them together in your kit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this particular kit, I mean, we're talking all about the nymphal stage of a particular fly. You have 4 stages of a fly. You have the nymph, you have the emerger, and that's when it's coming to the surface. And then you have the adult, which is when it's flying around. And then you have what they call the spinner. That's after it's mated and it's died and it's on the water. Those 4 stages of a fly are important to the feeding habits of a trout. But 90% of the time, fish are going to be feeding underwater. So that's why the nymph kit is the most important kit in our arsenal.
Wow, awesome. Let's not forget about like stoneflies, right? So why don't we go into like what are stoneflies?
Yeah, so a stonefly nymph is very similar to a mayfly nymph. The one thing that separates the two is that a stonefly only has 2 tails, where a mayfly has 3. Now, stoneflies are typically a little bit larger than mayflies in the nymphal stage. But another way you can kind of tell the difference between the two is a mayfly has just 2 feet, or how should I say this? A mayfly doesn't have toes. The feet on a stonefly actually looks like it has 2 little toes that come off of the front legs. So that's one way of looking at it as well. Another thing you can also look for when you're on the water is stonefly. They don't come to the surface and then turn into an adult and fly away. They actually crawl out of the water and get onto rocks to dry out before they hatch or before they molt and turn into an adult. So if you're walking down the riverbed and you see these kind of like empty shells, those are most likely stoneflies. Another cool thing about stoneflies is it's a good representation of how healthy the river system is, how healthy a watershed is. They can't survive, especially in the nymph stage, in any pollution. So if you're at a body of water and one year there's a bunch of stoneflies and then the next year there's not, you might want to look into what's upriver, because it has to be very pristine water for a stonefly to live. They need a lot of oxygen. They need running water. So it's kind of like the canary in the coal mine when it comes to water.
Okay, awesome. So, and then what about the items that are marked like mayfly, stonefly, and vice versa?
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to the caddis mayfly, stonefly. These are patterns that people are tying to represent more than one particular order, more than one fly, for instance. These are great because they are mimicking 2 things, right? So you can, when you're fishing them, a trout might look at it and say, hey, I don't quite know what that is, but it looks good. I'm going to eat it.
Okay. And then what is the last thing in the box? And let's take a look at the box. Let's look at it and then try to give people. And then in terms of like stoneflies, caddis, and all that stuff, I mean,
yeah. So side 1 on the box, let me get it right upside for you. Is that right? Yeah, side 1. So side 1, we have midges, 2 rows of midges, 2 rows of mayflies, and what I call my worm and egg section. This right here are egg patterns, and worm patterns are annelids. We'll go back to that. Let's talk about the other side. On the other side, we have a row of caddis flies. We have a row of caddis and mayfly patterns. We have a row of mayfly stonefly, actually 2 rows of those, and then we have straight stoneflies. As you can see here, the stoneflies that are just stoneflies, a lot bigger than your mayfly caddis or your mayfly stonefly. If you look on this side too, our midges are pretty tiny. They're small. They're size 22, but that's how they are. And if the closer you are to the size, the more trout you're going to catch. Okay. And the reason the last one we have eggs and worms is I like to call it eggs and bacon, right? Certain times of year that these patterns are going to be more successful. Worms are great when you have high water. If you have runoff, murky water, muddy water, that's going to be pushing a lot of those worms into the system. And trout are going to start to key in on those. So it's always good to have a handful of those in your box. Same goes with the egg patterns, right? So egg patterns, trout will feed on eggs, right? On other fish's eggs, on brown trout eggs, on rainbow trout eggs, so brown trout typically are going to be spawning September through November, and your rainbow trout are going to be coming in eating those brown trout eggs, and then kind of vice versa in the spring. So in the spring, the rainbows are going to be spawning, and now your brown trout are going to be coming in eating those eggs. So it's always good to have a handful of those patterns with you as well, depending on that time of year.
Wow. I mean, this has been going through all of this. I mean, this is, I feel like, one of the most in-depth videos that we've done. Why don't you tell people where they could get this product from?
Yeah, so we sell all of our stuff on drifthook.com. Just go to the shop now button, and it's going to be your either number 1 or number 2 kits on that shop now button. Down below, there'll be a link here from the site, so everybody can go check that out. I'll also leave a link down below for all of our free videos and tutorials. We have over 200 blog posts that go in depth into fly fishing. And if you ever have any questions, just hit us up on our social, or you can ask questions here on the YouTube channel, and we'll get back to you. And we just love talking fly fishing. So
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Don't forget to leave questions. Sorry, go ahead, Matt. No, I was just going to say, don't forget to leave questions below, because we look for all these questions online from people that are into fly fishing. So if you have any questions, we'll definitely get enough of those to make a full episode and answer those directly.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. Awesome, man. Thanks so much for your time, and looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. Talk to you soon.